Getting married in Thailand was a bit of a trip, and as I have a habit of paying very little attention to things I'm not interested in, meant that every step of the wedding process came as a massive surprise to me. Starting with the date. I can't count how many weddings I've been to in Thailand that are followed by a surprise pregnancy announcement on Facebook just 1 or 2 months after the wedding. I am aware that a lot of weddings here get rushed because of pregnancy to hide it from the older generation who still have issues with sex before marriage. At the same point, I have no idea why the older people aren't questioning why every baby in Thailand just seems to be born 3 months premature. If there's one saving grace about my marriage is that I felt lucky that I got the choice to propose to my wife, as we found out she was pregnant just 4 weeks after I proposed to her. But if the proposal had just been over 5 weeks later, it would have been less about sharing a romantic rooftop dinner on the top of a French restaurant overlooking the beach, and more like an intervention being overseen by people demanding to be my in-law. So upon hearing the news of the surprise pregnancy, we weren't immediately focused on the idea of welcoming a beautiful baby into the world. We were instead hell-bent on trying to figure out the logistics of an international wedding that had been moved from 8 months' time to only happening in 12 weeks. And then there's sinsot, or what we might refer to as a dowry. Again, something I had very little particular interest in. I was also very uneducated about it at the time. I thought it was similar to what we might do in Australia, which is meet with the bride's father before the wedding to see that I have his support and blessing to take care of his daughter's hand in marriage. So when my Thai fiance asked me how much I would pay for sinsot to her parents, she wasn't very particularly happy with my answer of, I don't know, 4 chung beers and a bottle of sangsom. I miss being that naive. How can I explain this? In my head, I logically can't agree with the concept of a sinsot or a dowry. Whenever people invest money, they invest it expecting growth in the future. And older people aren't the future. You don't go to university, you don't open new businesses or discover hidden talents when you're over 60 years old. There is not a lot of room for creating additional wealth in Thailand by spending all day walking like a hunchback penguin. You don't know what I'm talking about with the penguin? Watch their feet. I don't know why they do that. But in my head, sinsot is the equivalent of taking a huge pile of cash and investing in a company that still makes VCRs. But can you imagine trying to explain to a Thai girl that you don't want to pay sinsot because her parents are VHS tapes in a streaming world? That would have gone down as well as my idea of telling her parents that I lost all my money gambling and coincidentally winning it all back the day after the wedding. And this is only my problem with the concept of sinsot, not the actual process of how it's done here. Firstly, if you're a Thai girl watching this, I can't recommend enough the idea of marrying a phalung who doesn't speak Thai, because sinsot is supposed to be like buying something from a market and negotiating on the best deal possible. But to phalungs, sinsot is like buying a product from a supermarket. We don't know that there's wiggle room. We think it's a take it or leave it situation. I had no idea it was negotiable. If it was, I would have been countering with things about how their grandchild will be bilingual, well-educated, multicultural because of their daughter's marriage to me. Instead, every time I got told a value for sinsot, I just screamed, "Kom kun," and ran out of the room crying. My next issue is that how the value is even calculated for sinsot. I mean, how are people coming up with these numbers in any practical sense? Is there a sinsot doctor who analyzes the girls and explains to the parents, okay, look, she's got a lighter shade of skin and a straight nose, but she's dumb as dog shit and her pussy is thrashed to high hell, 300,000 baht tops. After sinsot, the next step was to begin organizing what Thais call pre-wedding photos. Ugh. No, that doesn't describe it accurately. I have no doubt that the tradition of pre-wedding photos in Thailand started with a woman trying on a gown and looking at herself in the mirror thinking, fuck, I actually look good right now. Take photos of me before the baby makes me fat. Some clever bridal store owners heard this and realized that they could charge a shitload of money simply for couples coming in to try on their clothes. Because that is all that pre-wedding photos really are here, expensive dress-ups. I'm not for 1 minute buying this idea that photos are required for displaying at the Thai wedding. Have you ever gone to a wedding and thought, where's the goddamn photos at? This wedding is bullshit. No, you wouldn't give a fuck. And that's the same deal with 90% of the things at weddings: decorations, flowers, cakes. But let's face it, The only reason people go to weddings is to eat and drink for free, so if you hold your wedding at a sizzler, most people wouldn't even notice the difference. Okay, but it's probably best to start talking about the actual wedding day, because I haven't even started on how much of a shitstorm of confusion that 20 hours was for me. Because a wedding day in Thailand begins on both a low and a high. The low part being waking up so early that even the coffee machine yells at you, "Fuck off, I'm sleeping." The high part being when you see your soon-to-be wife looking absolutely amazing after the 5 hours of hair and makeup that she's been going through while you were still sleeping. Little bit of advice here though, don't look at your absolutely beautiful but also ridiculously tired and stressed wife and the first thing you say is, "Why the fuck can't you look this good every day?" You like having functioning balls. Now, the morning ceremony for us was being held in traditional style at my wife's folks' house in the province of Sakao, which, to explain it in regards to civilization, is roughly 3 hours from Bang Sen where we live and around 100 kilometers from the nearest McDonald's. Now, just as Thai people probably don't understand why Falungs think eating chocolate and sugar for breakfast is a good idea, I don't understand how they think pork and whiskey makes for a good first meal of the day either. Because even though the wedding started at 6 a.m, every table in the house had so much meat and booze on it, I was beginning to wonder if we're at my wedding or had rocked up to a fucking Irish funeral. And as soon as we arrived, the wedding ceremony commenced, and as did too my day of understanding what it feels like to be a well-trained dog. Because I was living in a world of people that I couldn't understand except my soon-to-be owner, who would regularly command me of what to do and occasionally compliment me on being a good boy. First part of the ceremony involved kneeling down on the floor in front of a bunch of monks for around about an hour. Now, I'd like to say I didn't fall asleep at my own wedding, but it's not really the most adrenaline charging thing listening to a bunch of bald guys hum nonsense for 60 minutes either. And the only reason that I probably woke up was because I finally had something to do, which was get wet for Jesus, or Buddha. Same shit. Turned out that deciding in the morning to spend a lot of time doing my hair for what I was expecting to be a very special occasion was a complete waste of time, as whenever a monk in Thailand comes near me with that water splashy thing, seem to mistake me for a car that hasn't been washed since 1985. So after having around about 5 liters of water dunked on my head, the monk then spent a couple of minutes just dabbing at my forehead with this white stuff, like a kid getting the finger paint for the first time in their life. Needless to say, my wedding day had only been going on for around about 30 minutes, and I barely looked anything like I had when I walked out of the hotel room that morning. Meanwhile, my wife was in absolute pristine condition with barely a drop of paint or water on her. Seems like monks here have much more self-preservation of their balls than I do. After this part of the ceremony ended, I noticed all my Aussie mates were finally rocking up to the house now, complete in suits and oversized sunglasses to hide their massive hangovers. Turned out that they'd partied until 5 a.m. and most of them were still drunk, which made it fun watching my wife explain to them that they now had to walk all the way down the street in the hot Thai sun, carrying all these very large heavy gifts for a couple of 100 meters, only to then stop, turn around, and carry them all the way back to the house again. Hey, if you got a bunch of Falungs visiting bumfuck Thailand, why not get them to perform an impromptu parade while you've got the chance? Now, during all of this walking around the streets, my wife had to wait back at the house, so we had all these Thai people who couldn't speak a lick of English telling 20 Thai Falungs what to do, where to stand, how to hold the gifts, and when to walk, etc. Which was like watching a bunch of farmers try to herd a group of buffaloes who'd found their master's whiskey barrels the night before. Utter chaos. What also didn't particularly help with the focus was that there was a group of 10 women dancing and screaming the entire time in front of us like they were preteen girls at a BTS concert. But when we got back to the house was probably the only part of the wedding ceremony that my wife had decided to speak to me about previously. It's a part of Thai ceremonies where multiple couples of Thai women will hold up these rope barriers between the groom and the bride, and every time the groom approaches a couple holding a barrier, they will request him to perform a usually embarrassing or silly task like singing or doing push-ups. So he proceeds to look like a doofus for a minute, at which point they lower the gate and he hands them an envelope that holds cash inside of it. So the reason I knew about this part of the wedding is because my wife had asked me to put aside 20,000 baht for this part of the wedding as gifts to the women holding the barriers. So I knew exactly what was in the huge pile of envelopes someone quickly handed to me: my money. And because that money was now physically back under my control, I suddenly had very little desire to let it go. So I began the process of doing what request each girl asked with as little enthusiasm as possible. Sing a song, you'll get one line. Speak Thai, sawadi yet meh. Do 20 push-ups. Eat a fucking dick. And as each gate went down, I would proceed to hand over only one envelope to the girls who had been holding it up, thinking that was how it worked. But not only was I supposed to hand over around about 5 envelopes to each girl, but because my wife had majorly overcompensated on the amount of gates that she had expected, by the last gate, I still had a huge amount of envelopes in my hand. But all I could think at the time was, fuck, yes, I'm making some bank at my own wedding. Obviously, it was at this point that my wife noticed that I was happy and realized something was wrong. So after seeing the envelopes, she screamed at me that I was supposed to give out multiple of them to all of the people and have none left by the end of the parade. It was also rather convenient that her sisters just happened to be the last 2 people holding a gate up in front of me. So instead of waiting for my future sisters-in-law to offer me a challenge, I just held out the stack of envelopes to them, at which point they immediately dropped the barrier and ran off to count the easiest 9,000 baht that they'll ever earn in their entire lives. Meanwhile, I was wondering if it was too early to ask my future sisters-in-law for a loan. It's right around now that my memory of the morning ceremony becomes blurred from how tired I was that day, but I definitely remember what was, I consider, the best part of the wedding, which was when people would come up and pour water on our hands and tie a bracelet around our wrists. And the reason that this is the best part is because by the time that everyone had blessed us, my fingers were covered in enough bling to make a New York pimp jealous, because at this point some people, only Thai of course, would offer gold rings as gifts to the groom and place them onto my fingers. Of course, my wife's reliable spidey senses kicked in the moment she saw me smile and quickly snatched all the rings off and put them in her purse, never to be seen again. From what I remember, I think after this part of the ceremony, my wife and I were then told to go and wait in a bedroom alone for 20 minutes, as if to imply that we were going to consummate the marriage. Too late! But the majority of the time that we were in the room was trying to stop my wife from killing me, because I was planning on leaving the room screaming, "Fucking Thailand, the wedding's off. She's got a dick." I also really wonder how long it's been since people have actually had sex at this point of the wedding, because ironically, despite how beautiful your new wife currently looks at this time, I would have only considered having sex if it meant that I could sleep for the rest of the day. And I have no doubt that the last thing on my wife's mind was getting her hair and makeup ruined by me waddling on top of her for 30 seconds before saying, "Okay, I'm done." Besides, she's Thai and was a pregnant Thai woman at that, so the only thing that she had on her mind at the time was food. So as soon as we were done inside the room, she just barreled everyone out of her way in order to get to the buffet tray that she'd been using every ounce of willpower to ignore for the last 3 hours. As usual, I just followed her around like a little puppy waiting to be told what to do next. So when she said that we had around about 6 hours until the evening ceremony, I immediately yelled, "Yay!" and fell asleep on the spot. Should have listened to my wife's advice to eat first though, because I had no idea that the next time I would get a chance to eat food would be around about 12 hours away, because it turned out that when we arrived at the evening ceremony being held at an open hall in the middle of her town, instead of playing the role of a puppy dog like I was in the morning, I was now expected to be a smiling mannequin for the next 2 hours as I pretended to enjoy taking photos with people that I'd never met before. Turns out there's only so many times that you can say, "Hi, nice to meet you," before you're uttering it through gritted teeth. That number is roughly 500 times. Because we had over 800 guests at our wedding, and I knew like 30 of them. When the ceremony actually began, I have no qualms at admitting my wife and I shed a few tears as we walked down the aisle to romantic music and towards the stage. Her mainly because everything that she'd been hoping had gone to plan. Me because I'd let her choose a fucking song by Ed Sheeran instead of Metallica. I will give credit where credit is due though, and everyone who helped out with the day was absolutely amazing. Her family had been running around non-stop, making sure that everything was perfect. Our Thai friends did an incredible job emceeing the night and helping guests, and my friends and family didn't once complain about being sat at tables with the signs "foreigners" on them rather than, friends of the group. Once the ceremony ended, I immediately noticed that 90% of the guests had left after devouring all the food and alcohol, so I became like a vulture, and I spent the next 30 minutes just going around table to table looking for scraps of any food that I paid for to eat finally. Turned out that the only table that actually had any food left was the table allocated to the head of the village. Now, a custom in village weddings is that you get the head of the village to come and speak at your wedding, and he was still there with a couple of his friends. But because my wife hadn't explained to me very well what a head of a village is, I figured I was eating with the head of the local mafia, so anytime he tried to speak to me, I had no idea what he was saying and would just reply, "Thank you, Don Sakao." Now, during this end part of the night, an old band that I played in, they came up to perform, and I ended up joining them for what I consider the most appropriate song I could ever think of to play at a wedding. Rage Against the Machine's Killing in the Name. Now, if you haven't heard this song before, just know that it feels mightily cathartic after all the wedding madness that has taken place over the last few months to scream 100 times at my new wife the line, "Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me," over and over again into a microphone. Too bad I hadn't thought to do that 6 months earlier when she told me she wanted to be married before 30. But in all sincerity, the day was pretty amazing. I'm grateful for marrying such a top woman who I know without a doubt would become a perfect mother in the future, and I'm glad to have now become a member of her warm and loving family. Especially after I just given away all my money and I knew my sisters-in-law had 18,000 baht sitting around the house somewhere. Come on, I'm family. Give